Everybody, I'm Al. You know me. I'm here at the Kelly Writers House in the Arts Cafe. And to my left, and in a sense, your right, is Lainey Brown. Good morning, Lainey Brown.
Nice to see you.
Do you want to put that mic really close up?
Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. And we have Chris and Zach and Zelda working the tech. And they're flash us. Say hello, guys. They're masked. We're not because, I don't know. We're very careful. We're far apart. Lainey and I are. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of good circulation in this room. This is week 2 of ModPo, and this is our week 2 webcast, and we're very excited about it. This is a week where things are relatively simple in the structure of the main syllabus. ModPo Plus explodes this week, but the main syllabus looks pretty straightforward, and then things get a little crazy from here. So enjoy it. The number you'll be calling today is 610-616-3208. That's the number we always use, 610-616-3208. And if you want to Skype from overseas or anywhere, use ModPo Pen. And we have many ways to interact with us, as usual. So by Twitter, you're going to use the hashtag ModPo Live. And Lily, are you a Twitterer this morning? You feeling twitty? Great. So Lily will do the tweets. And Amber Rose usually does the Facebook group, but Amber Rose isn't here yet this morning. Who's interested in, who's a Facebook person? Oh, nobody's going to volunteer if I put it that way. Max, do you have access to a machine, and would you go into Facebook? Would you post, usually Amber Rose posts a little note there saying, hi, I'm here, comment here. So Max will do the Facebook group. And for those of you who are tolerant of Facebook, you're going to look for the ModPo group at facebook.com/groups/ModPo. Another way to do it is just to go into the search box of Facebook and type ModPo. All right, the YouTube comment stream. Gabby, you're savvy about that? Gabby's savvy. Okay, thank you. So feel free to write. And then the discussion forum thread, Dave Poplar. There is a dedicated thread in the discussion forum. Would you take a look at that and tell us what's there when it's time? Thank you, Dave. So we're saying good morning to Lily. Hi, Lily.
Morning.
Hey, and Erica Kaufman is here. Hello, Erica. Good morning.
Morning.
Dave Poplar, we've already said hello to. Max, we've already said hello to. Good morning, Gabby, we've already said hello to. Yay. Chicago nice right now? Cooling off?
I wouldn't know because I am in Northfield, Massachusetts on a little vacation. So
the discussion forum. You are on a vacation? I've never known you to take a vacation.
Oh, God, I don't know what that says about me, but I am, in fact, on a vacation.
There are many reasons why I love you, and one is you work really hard, and you're always thinking and doing stuff, and you do look a little like you're on vacation, though. It's nice.
You'll be disappointed to know that I am, in fact, working on my dissertation while I'm here, but, okay, I'm in a different place.
Disappointed. I mean, did you not hear what this thing about love? What I love about you is that you kind of take it all with you, and, whatever. Anyway, thanks for joining us on your vacation. And Kate Colby is here. Hello, Kate.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. So, Kate, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being totally comfy and relaxed and unanxious, and 1 being freaked out, where are you in terms of the live, not planned, spontaneous ModPo webcast? How do you feel at this point?
Your scale kind of went backward, but
10 would be 10 is good, really relaxed and happy. And
okay.
No prob.
I'm not freaked. You've hauled me into these several times before.
The 1 through 10 thing? Okay. You can decline. But how are you doing? It's starting to make sense, this webcast thingy, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm like the old teacher with the VCR fumbling with the technology, but
okay, I'm going to
here with you.
Zach and Chris, in order to make Kate comfy, with our system. We need to integrate a VCR into the. These guys will do it.
I probably have one somewhere in my basement.
I have one too, yeah. But I think it would be good because Chris and Zach never like to be bored by the tech. They're always looking for something. I think adding a VCR would be great.
Haul in the media cart.
They love these are media cart kind of guys. They've got carts all over the place. Jason is here. Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Good morning, Al.
Hi,
Doing
buddy.
well.
And Kanar has joined us.
Good morning.
Hi, Kanar. Yeah. Zach and Chris, can you give us a Brady Bunch view? Yeah, that's helpful for us so we can see everybody. Okay.
Amber Rose is here.
So Amber Rose. Hey, Amber Rose.
Amber Rose.
Good morning.
Hey,
Hello. I have just a couple things to say generally, but then we'll get started. The number is 610-616-3208. In a minute, I'm going to ask Lainey Brown what her favorite main syllabus week 2 poem is. Before that, while Lainey is thinking about that, before that, I just want to say that I had a really fun Zoom office hour between 8 and 9, and to my colleagues, my TA colleagues, we're all sort of deciding week to week whether we're going to do Zoom or whether we're going to do the almost synchronous, asynchronous chat-like thing in the discussion forums, which works really well. I recommend the Zoom. It was such a fun conversation. Kat McCardle in Australia loves the 8 a.m. because it was 10 p.m. there, or 11. Miranda Jubb from England, Dominic Weston, our buddy from England, was there. And two new ModPoers, Shantine, who is just an exile from graduate school at Harvard in architecture, just really didn't like the whole experience and wound up kind of resetting the button or pushing the reset button. And Shantine was such a fun interlocutor in this office hour. I know Shantine is watching, so yay, Shantine, welcome to ModPo as you reset. And Anand, Anand's last name is Khosri. Anand is in Mumbai, and Anand is a business professor, a professor of business at a university there, and has been asked by his school in Coursera to create a course. And then what did Anand do? Asked for recommendations. What would be a good model? Haha. Somebody steered him to ModPo, and now poor Anand is trying to create a business course, a massive open online business course based on ModPo. How the F is that going to happen? I have no idea, but I know Anand is watching this webcast, so maybe he'll call and tell us. All right, and then one last thing. A suggestion came up as to how to emphasize the fact that ModPo doesn't require you to do every poem and march through the 10 weeks or take the quizzes or do the essays if you don't want to, that you can do 3 poems in a week, you can do all of them, you can do none of them, you can move on to the next week. And I asked these people in this office hour how many of them felt like that message was getting across from me and others, that it's okay, relax, you don't have to do everything in the course, you don't have to take the certificate. And they all said they did hear that message, but that so many people take a course. The word course throws them off. And not that Coursera does anything to dissuade you with all of its reminders. I mean, you get a red light if you haven't gone on. You get a green light if you go on. There's all kinds of deadlines and reminders. So the whole thing is pitched to get you into a anxious frenzy about finishing, completing. And I asked them what we could do, and they suggested that we convene a little Zoom session with ModPo people, all of whom learn to relax and just do the course the way they do it, and have them give testimony and then edit that video and put that video out. I thought that was a great idea. All right, so week 2, we have a couple of Williams poems that are Whitmanian or supposedly Whitmanian, Smell and Don Roos. We have Ginsberg's Supermarket in California. We have 3 Laureen Niedecker poems, You Are My Friend, Foreclosure, Grandfather Advised Me, sometimes called Poet's Work. Sid Corman, a little Corman poem, It Isn't for Want. A Ray Armantrout poem, which is anticipating what's going to happen in week 8. It's called The Way. And in ModPo Plus, tons and tons of Niedecker, lots of other poems. And some poets, including Jason Suska, our own, and Kate Colby, our own. So there's a lot in ModPo Plus this week. So I'm going to ask Lainey Brown, what's your favorite main syllabus poem at the moment, and why?
It's a tough question because there's so much that I love, but I'm going to say poet's work at this moment. And the reason is that it lends an amazing permission to value what is often not valued. And I also came across it probably in grad school, so it was really formative for me for, decades now.
Did it help you decide what work is, what the real work is?
It aligned with what I already believed. Mm-hmm. And I feel that I received a lot of messages that were contrary to that poem.
Oh, no.
In life.
From grandfathers? Or grandfather types?
More from like parents and culture and material reality in growing up in Southern California, Los Angeles.
And how dangerous, how risky was it to go against that enforcement of values about work?
Well, it's not riskier than anything else, I don't think. I never questioned that I would go against it, but it's taken time to dim down the noise that goes against it, or to not let it bother me.
One last question: what do you think of Laureen's decision? Her tone and her attitude toward pushing back? Is it a good strategy?
I find it really helpful. Yes.
So you know what? This conversation, thank you, Lainey. This conversation puts me in mind of something that Alicia Ferguson, I think it's Elisa Ferguson, who's I think new or in the second year in ModPo, what Elisa wrote about the work. So I'm going to read this comment, and I realize that my TA colleagues don't have access to the comment easily, so you're just going to have to hear me say it. And I will then invite Allie, Amber-Rose, and Kinar just to react. Actually, Allie, Amber-Rose, Kinar, and Jason, just to respond briefly to what Elisa's saying about the work. She is talking about the word this, the importance of the meta-poetic word this in Dickinson, and interprets this to refer to the work, and leans toward an understanding of the work in the psychotherapeutic sense. For anybody familiar with psychotherapy and other forms of psychological treatment or talk-based therapy, you're probably familiar with that cliche that therapists use, which is we need to do the work, or you need to do the work. And this is a phrase, in fact, that Anna Strong Safford, our much-loved pal who's teaching high school at this moment, but is definitely still a TA, uses in the original ModPo videos. You got to do the work, meaning stay with the poem, the work. So I'm going to read Elisa's comment, and I would like to invite Allie, Amber-Rose, Kinar, and Jason very briefly each just to respond to this concept of the work in any way you like. Elisa writes, I've been thinking about the this in I Dwell in Possibility, and there was a discussion in the video about this being the work. The work is also a term used in the context of therapy when you are trying to figure out some of the deepest things about yourself. And it is called work because it requires effort, exertion, focus, time, and none of these things are easy. Many of us perhaps feel like we don't have time for extra work in our lives, and maybe we wish to enjoy the outcome of work without doing the work. We want to get to the possibility, but it's easier to take the path of prose, capital P prose, where there is ease, comfort, familiarity. We want to skip ahead, skip the work, even though this is impossible. All right, so that's kind of interesting and I think rather moving. Allie, then Amber-Rose.
Yeah, I really like the idea of thinking of this as like the work of kind of working on yourself and self-interrogation in addition to interrogating a poem in the act of reading or writing it. And I think I think that's really wonderfully applicable to Poet's work. No layoff from this condensery. I think there's a sense that in that comment, like a lot of people don't have the time to do the work, or they don't want to take that effort or go into the unpleasantness of what that might be. But there is no layoff from this condensery. And if you don't do that, if you don't like take moments to do that kind of like self interrogation, which oftentimes like includes like how you fit into the world, at a certain point, that's gonna, at what point is that not going to be sustainable anymore?
Can I ask you a follow-up question, and you can be as personal or impersonal as you like in answering it? How are you doing with the work? I mean, partly because I know you're struggling with what's the work? What is the work? As in occupation, preoccupation, job, that kind of thing. How are you doing with the work? And then another, you can dodge that if you want, and another version of the question is, you write prose, and there's all this stuff about cheerleading for poetry, and prose is somehow not as much of the work. I know that's not true for you, so you can take either question. I'm more interested in the first one, but you can dodge it and do the second.
Well, I would say prose is definitely also the work. I think part of the way that I'm doing with the work in terms of how Lori Niedeker is talking about it, I think most first and foremost is that struggle that you have with the work, which is just doing the work, which I feel like is a very almost like, I don't know, Steinian answer, just the repetition or something. But
I totally like it. Thank you. Amber Rose, and then Kanar responding to Elisa Ferguson, who's, I think, very sensitively trying to understand what the work is and whether it's worth it and so forth. And I know, Amber Rose, you are totally every day entailed in this whole question, because the kind of work that we do as scholars and writers is, let us just say, not remunerative. So you have to find some other reason for doing it so obsessively.
Yeah, I really like the comment, thinking through this and the work. And I was thinking about the specificity. This is a word that's often used when we're trying to be very specific. No, not that. It's this right here. And what's so interesting about our kind of collective interest or investment in the word this is that we recognize that it is supposed to be very specific, but as poetry teaches us, it's also fully informed by whatever we are carrying and bringing to the reading. So any person can say, yeah, I'm deep in it. I'm deep in the work, the heart work, whatever it is. I'm deep into this. And what allows that to resonate across people, right, across relation, is not that we necessarily know the full details of that person's work, but we know what it is to recognize the heart thing, the deep down thing, the thing that I don't want to do, the thing that makes me like, the thing that like where my anxiety lives first thing in the morning, or whatever it is. Like we can all identify that kind of like that thing that's under us, that thing that we don't want to talk about. So I might not know what your this is, but I know what it is to like have and hold that kind of place and to have an attention to that kind of place. And the last thing I quickly just want to say is that I'm looking again at the poem, and what comes after this, or what we might assume that Dickinson is talking about, is the spreading wide my narrow hands to gather paradise. And thinking about this with the work is changing the way that I'm thinking about that word paradise, because if this, the life work, the heart work, is spreading wide the hands. Dickinson of all people knows that paradise is not easy, right? That it's not sweet and it's not cut and dry. But maybe the paradise is the recognition that like we have the capacity to keep trying in the work. And there's a kind of really, really gentle like gratitude in that.
Wow, that was really beautiful. And I think you did a great job. It's so amazing that Lainey chose Poet's Work, Grandfather Advised Me, as the favorite poem, which was not a setup, because of and Elisa's comment that connects I Dwell in Possibility to work. And Amber Rose just connected those two poems in a way that really is very Niedeckerian in itself. So, wow. I just want to say wow. Okay, Kanar and Jason briefly each a further response to Elisa, or the idea that the work is connected in the therapeutic sense to knowing more about yourself or digging deep or whatever. Kanar?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating question. And, I like this framing of thinking about the kind of therapeutic environment. As I was kind of listening to other folks work through and talk through this, I was thinking about the difference between, and I think because of the line about being at desk, the difference between being at work and being in work. What sorts of inhabitants are maybe implied by each of those. But I think for me, I've both been at and in work in different scenarios. And I certainly would say I prefer kind of being in work, which maybe is more of a Dickinsonian sort of dwelling in possibility. I think I'll, in closing, just refer to a quick thing that comes to mind, which is Raoul Zarita on Paradise, but the idea that, no matter the conditions, the imperative is to keep proposing it sort of no matter what. And I think that's a sort of form of being in work.
I love that a lot. And I think that you successfully did what we do at our best, which is to put it all into a preposition, an idiom, and the idiom uses prepositions not willy-nilly. I mean, it's a pretty serious situation. At work is one thing, and in work is a totally different thing. And the same with at desk. Jason, quickly in response to this question about work, while you're getting ready to speak, 610-616-3208. Chris, do we have a call yet? Okay, so the line is open, 610-616-3208. And after Jason speaks, I would like to ask Lily, Max, Gabby, and Dave to tell us what's going on in the various chats and forums. So thank you. Lily is ready. Jason, what are your thoughts? I know this is right up your alley. You think a lot about what work constitutes.
I think a lot about work, and I think a lot about the word this. So it's a good combo. And it's a great question. I actually just got this book in the mail yesterday.
Hey, let's hold it up a little so we can hold it up still. We can't see the author's name.
There we go.
It's Adam Phillips.
Adam Phillips. Yep, thank you.
So the first chapter is called Poetry and Psychoanalysis. And so I'm excited to read that because I think there's a deep relationship there in terms of the work. But just simply about the word this, part of the work of the word this, I think, has to do with the way in which it instantly triggers a triangulation between the speaker, the reader or the listener, and something that is not of them directly. Like I could say this and point to my heart, or this and point to my hand, or this and point to the poem. But in doing it, it creates like a spatial relationship between, like it creates an intimacy that that the word that doesn't create. This means you're close enough to see what I'm pointing to.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, that's right. It is a spatial thing. This is close. That is other, kind of, or far away. Yeah. So what we're going to do now, thank you all, Allie, Amber Rose, Kanar, and Jason. What we're going to do now is we're going to call on Lily to tell us what's happening in the tweets, And Kate, I would love for you to respond to anything that Lily conveys over from the tweets. Then Max is going to tell us what's going on in Facebook, if anything. And I'm going to ask Gabby to respond in any way to any of that. Then Gabby is going to respond to what's happening in the YouTube comment stream. And I'm going to ask Max to respond to that. This is complicated. And then Dave is going to tell us what's going on in the subforum thread for the webcasts. And I'll ask Erica to respond to that. Now, if I can remember that, we're good. So first, Lily, what's happening among the Twitterers?
Okay, Kate, I have a good one for you, I think. Dennis Aguinaldo, our friend in the Philippines, actually did an amazing reading of doing the work of ModPo through the Lori Niedecker poem we were just discussing, Poet's Work. So I'll read his tweet here. He says, doing poetry as a to-do list, meaning like, I think going through and doing every single ModPo task, doing poetry as a to-do list grates against Niedecker's idea of work. No layoff, tick off all the poems or not, no layoff. As long as the condensation continues, the work is alive.
Wow. How many tweets was that? That sounds like
just one. Very condensed. Good job, Dennis.
My gosh, Dennis Aguinaldo is the best. Okay, Kate, do you want to respond in any way to that, please?
Sure. I love that comment. I think that's right. She would bristle against the sequential nature of those kind of task ticking assignments. As Jason was saying, the thisness of the poet's work collapses the relationship between the reader and the writer, and it makes time into a singularity. So I think the time of going through the course and doing things one after the other is inimical to that work she's illustrating here.
Nice. Thank you, Kate and Lily and Dennis. So we're going to turn to Max, who's looking at the Facebook group, and I'm going to ask Gabby to respond to whatever's there.
We have greetings from Sanjeev and from Meredith and Dan Bergman, and a comment from Lawrence Torino about work. Lawrence writes, there are two positions in therapy. One is more active work. There is also the position of allowing the work to happen. It is less active, more receptive, which I think was an interesting distinction that might contribute a little bit more to what we were saying a second ago about work.
Great. Thank you so much, Lawrence. Gabby, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if we want to take the therapy angle further, right? Like in the typical therapeutic scene, you have the like analyst and the analysand, which is like you when you go to therapy. But those positions constantly switch. And the whole point of it is that you meet in some sense, and those roles have their meaning. But once you leave the room, you're actually doing more of the work of therapy than you were in that meeting, right? Like this is the thing that therapists say. It's one of their cliches. Like actually the work happens mostly outside of the meeting, right? And so in that case, you're not just the analysand, you're also working with the analyst that you are and the analyst in your head, and you're trying to figure out something about yourself. I mean, I think that one of the things that is inscribed into that no layoff from this condensory is that like poet's work doesn't only happen in the scene of writing a poem, a new poem, a thing that you'll publish, or, you know, that kind of a thing. I think that's like a far too decorated way of thinking about poetic labor. In fact, it seems to happen, and I think Niedecker would be the kind of main person for thinking about this. It seems to happen atmospherically and just constantly. Sorry, that was my alarm clock, which signals that I don't usually wake up this early.
Wow, it was loud. We heard it in the room here.
Sorry. But let me tell you about what's happening on the YouTube stream. So actually, I wanted to highlight
we're switching to that. Great. Thank you. Wait, can I just say one thing in response to that statement you said about therapy? I think we could apply that wisdom that you've shared from therapists. It's a convenient thing that therapists say because they don't want you to walk out of the session thinking that everything is done. They want you to think, oh, there's more work to do. Come back next week and tell me about it. But I think it creates a really interesting, productive, and I would say progressive, emotionally progressive way that Lorraine Niedecker does her work, which is to say the grandfather interaction, which is a therapeutic moment trying to deal with the grandfather problem that she's been having and the occupation's salary problem that she's been having in her life. And then walking out of the therapeutic situation is to write all the other poems that are not so meta as that, right? This is a meta poem because it's about that crisis that causes her to need the therapy of pushing back against Grandpa. And I really love that, the idea that the poems, and there are many of them that are not meta. Of course, in ModPo, we only feature the meta ones because we're obsessed with that. But there's so many other poems where she does the work. Yeah. Okay. YouTube chat. Go ahead. What do we got?
Yeah, there's just there's an interesting bit of ambivalence about the conversation we've been having that I want to highlight. So coming from, I'd say mostly like Miranda Jubb, Hannah Linden, a couple others are asking, like, is work as a word too held down by negative connotations, too much associated with like the last thing you want to be doing, with remuneration, with bosses, with all this stuff. And I feel like one of the things they're highlighting is like that we don't have a way of talking about play in this poem, or that maybe play is sort of this like shadow term that Niedecker is like only a little bit ironically kind of like bringing along for the ride. And so I think if I can summarize the discussion that they're having there, which is really great, that one of the things they're asking for is like, what does all this say about play, poetry as play, and the kinds of like actual kinds of pleasurable enjoyment we get out of doing it.
This is so great. Don't you love these webcasts? We got all these people doing a lot of, work while they're playing around in the YouTube chat. And YouTube chats are not known for feeling like work. But anyway, this is really cool. And by the way, I'm going to ask Erica as well as Lainey to respond to this whole question. And before I do, Miranda Jubb, call us. I want you to call us. I would really love for you to call. Sorry to put you on the spot. 610-616-3208. And Miranda, you're in the UK, so ModPo Pen if you want to Skype. And actually not just Miranda, but anybody, but I would love to hear from Miranda. Erica, this is so up your alley professionally, this whole question, because your job, as I understand it, at Bard and elsewhere, is to try to bring this work to communities that aren't used to thinking of it that way. And I don't know, it just seems like translating work into something that makes sense for people's lives is what you do. And I might be wrong about that, but I know you have something to say about this, and I would love Lainey to respond to Erica.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And it is something that I do spend a lot of my time thinking about. And, if I'm hearing the question right, it's about, assumptions that we're making about what constitutes work more generally, and ways to create more of an organic connection that's not prescribed between the way that we're thinking of work in the context of ModPo and perhaps in the context of poetry more generally as being something that could be, not necessarily considered work for most people, but could become something that is at least accessible to more than just, the general, our community, I guess, within, not just within the Zoom box, but within ModPo as a whole. And I think that, it's a really complicated question. I'm sort of struggling with how to answer it, because I suspect that I myself would answer the work question a bit differently from what anyone said so far, because I'm straddling both worlds. And that, what I do for my work is I think about ways to support teachers around the world, often teachers who have very little resources. And, and I'm often encouraging them to work with the kind of work that we work with, which can be met with resistance, purely because of conditions that people are in. I'm speaking very generally, and I hope that I'm making sense.
You are making sense. And as we shift over to Lainey's response, I just want to throw in this question of resistance to the terms that we use. I mean, people who are already overwhelmed by work probably don't really appreciate our using the word work in that therapeutic sense. And I think Gabe was kind of picking up on that. Gabby was picking up on that. But I think the resistance is partly what's going on in these poems that we like so much. The resistance to the resistance. Anyway, Lainey, what are your thoughts? And then I want to turn to Dave to look at the forums. And Dave, I'm going to ask you yourself to respond to what's going on in the thread. And also Allie. Lainey?
So I think that's a really important conversation that Gabe pointed to, in that we're all navigating what are the boundaries between work and the rest of our life. But I think that we have to start with the question of how we're defining work, each of us, and what are the connotations of work. And imagine, replace the word work with, for you, why are we here? Why are we alive right now? What gives our life meaning? It may or may not be work in a conventional sense, but I think that Niederker is pointing to work in the sense of, this is why I'm alive, this is what I want to do. And so poetry as therapeutic is one possible path to this deeper understanding of who we are and why we're here. And this is also the now. So for me, all the arts have the potential to bring me in the now. And then I can do all of the work, not necessarily the work in a conventional time clock kind of a sense, but the work of trying to understand who I am, why I'm here, what is our world. Poetry is one vehicle to that, just like therapy is one vehicle to that. And there could be overlap between those, depending on why a person comes to poetry.
When you say the arts, you probably mean, it's a shorthand way of saying in a person's experience in the presence of art, not necessarily making it, but being with it.
In
or
it, that distinction
in it.
between in art as opposed to at art.
So here's my follow-up question.
Yeah.
Is this, what we're doing now, work? Because we're one step removed from experiencing the art. We're actually guiding people to such an experience.
I mean,
That's what criticism does
right now, because part of being in it.
Are you having fun? Is this play?
Yeah, part of being in it for me is the community, is how art as a vehicle to connect with other people, build community with other people, try to make it available to other people. That's a big part of it for me.
Kat McCardle this morning from Australia in our Zoom office hour said, ModPo is, I don't know if she used this phrase, but saving my life in lockdown, in quarantine there in Australia, because there are other people around. I don't think of it as work at all. She said, this is like what I need right now, and it's that elemental. Dave Poplar, so is there something going on in the thread that you want to convey to us? And then I'd like for you yourself to respond, and also Allie. And now I'm going to pitch again for those of you who have telephones out there. Last week we couldn't stop the calls. This week there aren't any calls. Give us a call. You think is the phone working? Have you tested it? Chris is getting really lonely over there. 610, just call to say hi. 610-616-3208. Dave, what do we have? I think you're muted, Dave.
So, sorry. Right. So, in the discussion forums.
Wait, is that your Pep?
Yeah, that's Pep. She loves in calls.
Okay.
So, Martin Porter says that an exciting week or two has thrown up two questions for me, one central and one a long shot. And the first one, the central question, is who should critique or commentate on poetry and how? Should it be poets in their poetry, poets in prose, such as lectures or essays, critics, or anybody else? His long shot question was, can we talk about how Lorene Nedeker constructed her poetry and how this connects with contemporary and avant-garde poetry? Nicholas Stern commented, what distinction can be made between a poet who is called a minimalist and a poet who is called a Dickinsonian? And then the last question is Matt Lutwin asks, hi ModPo, my question is, how does beauty figure into the poems we are reading? So just some simple questions we should be able to answer really quickly and conclusively here, put these to rest.
By the way, those are a bunch of questions, and I'm going to ask Allie to answer one of them, and then we'll go back to you, Dave, to answer one. And we'll do this efficiently because someone has just called us. Before we turn to Allie, Matt Lutwin, whom I met this morning, is the newest rookie superstar. I don't know if some of you have encountered Matt, but Matt's just working really hard. Speaking of work, everywhere in the forums, comes to the office hours. Yay, Matt. Thank you, Matt. You're the best. I learned that Matt is dealing with a work-life balance issue. Matt is an attorney working with labor unions in Pittsburgh and has got a lot of work to do. Boy, oh boy, is that a difficult part of the attorney situation right now, labor. And is doing that like crazy and is also doing ModPo pretty much many hours the week. And so, yay, Matt, life-work balance, yikes. Okay, Allie, do you want to respond to one thing that Dave said from the forums?
Sure. As Dave said, all very simple, straightforward questions. They're great questions. I'm thinking about the one about beauty. And I forget exactly how it was phrased, but like, how does beauty play into all of this? And I think that one of the like progressive challenges of ModPo, or something that like may get harder for some people as the weeks go on, is finding the beauty as they encounter more challenge in what they're used to seeing in a poem. And so I think that's just one of the kind of projects that this course is about, is where is the beauty? How does that manifest? Yeah, I think it's a good thing to kind of like keep tabs on.
Nice. I'm glad you answered that. That was the toughest question of all. But just to prep people, when we get to week 4 and we're dealing with Gertrude Stein, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but is it beautiful? And we really need to keep this in mind. Dave Poplar, will you answer one of the questions briefly, and then we're going to bring someone up on the phone?
Yeah, I wouldn't call this an answer, but I'm interested in the question about who should critique or commentate on poetry, because normative questions like that are interesting, and in the context of modern philosophy, modern poetry here, it's interesting to ask a normative question because it just seems like one of the main points of this modern poetry is really questioning some type of overarching authority, questioning a voice, an objective standard in a lot of ways. So it's interesting to ask that normative question in this meta way about meta poetry. So I don't know where that can go. It's just an almost unintentionally layered question, or maybe very intentionally layered.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally relevant. I mean, this is the fundamental question that we work with. I mean, the people in this conversation, Zoom plus here in the room, who are poets and also critics and theorists all at once, and teachers, we just don't know where we are at a certain point. Something that Erica Kaufman might be thinking or feeling in the course of being a critic or teacher is going to turn up in a poem, and the poem may be the best form of criticism. So, Chris, we have someone on the phone. Tell us who that is.
We do. We have Anand calling from India.
Ah, Anand, the aforementioned Anand.
Yes.
That
Very
is
exciting.
great. All right, bring Anand up. Hello, Anand. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
How are you? When I saw you this morning, well, this morning our time earlier,
Yes.
you
I'm
said
fine, so I
you
just wanted to.
yeah, you said you were going to watch the webcast, and here you are calling. That's
Yes,
so
yes,
great.
I am the webcast and just want to share with you. As I mentioned, it's my first time on ModPo and I'm really enjoying it.
Great.
More specifically, I read the supermarket in California and put a post on that and had a very quick and useful reply from Kate Colby. So I just want to appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Anand. That's very kind of you. Can you tell everybody how you found ModPo and what your challenge is as a business professor trying to do something like ModPo in business?
Yeah, I think the genesis is that I have been asked to prepare a course on innovation, and therefore I was looking at Coursera for various courses and wanted to see courses from other disciplines. And the ModPo is the course I settled on. And once I watched the video on Unveiling Possibility, I said I must do this course.
Anand, this is nuts. I mean, they've asked you to do something pretty crazy. I'm going to offer one response to your challenge, to the problem that you face. And then I'm going to ask you to hang up and listen to our responses through the webcast. Does that sound good?
Excellent. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Here's my response. You are being challenged by yourself or by your university, by your colleagues or by Coursera or some combo of that group to create a course on innovation. And your challenge is to try to make it innovative, the course. Because if you create a non-innovative course on innovation, no one is going to be persuaded. And you picked a course on experimental poetry, for goodness sakes. Wow. That's all I have to say. I cannot wait.
Thank you so much.
Yo, fantastic. I cannot wait for our ongoing conversation as you build the course. Thank you, Anand, for calling. Please, we're going to comment on this a little bit, but you'll hang up and you'll listen, and I'll see you maybe in office hours next week.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Anand. Anand calling from Mumbai, a professor of business. So I'm going to ask, for volunteers to wave at me if you have a response to this challenge. I mean, what a crazy thing for Anand's colleagues to recommend this course to figure out how he can create a course on innovation. That is just too tempting. I don't know what to do with that. But Anand is off the line, 610-616-3208, and you can Skype at ModPo Pen, and Chris is a little less lonely, but he's still feeling a little lonely now, so call. All right, wave at me if you have a non-snarky response to this whole challenge of a business course on innovation. Nobody's waving at me. Gabby is ready to sneeze. Max, just give us your reaction. What do you think? Is this crazy? Is Anand really up for how is this going to happen?
I don't know how crazy it is. I like to think that it's nice that ModPo would be the model, and I think what you said earlier, Al, about the fact that a course on innovation must needs be innovative in some way, right? It's this very nice form function harmony, but I think that's sort of the hall of mirrors of the concept like innovation, right? Is that in some ways, wouldn't it be more innovative to do a non-innovative course on innovation?
I'm sure Anand is you just saved Anand many thousands of dollars in setting up a course. Lainey, you're relatively new to the online pedagogy situation, relatively new. Mm-hmm. But you've been thinking a lot about teaching for a long time and how innovative you need to be when teaching innovative poetry. How seriously should we take that form content jive? Not in business, I mean in poetry. it really is true, isn't it? That if you're teaching avant-garde poetry, experimental poetry, you better be somewhat experimental. Is
I
that
think
just
so.
a statement, or is it really true?
No, I think so, because the conventional ways one learns to approach a straightforward narrative poem are not going to necessarily work with other kinds of poems. And so it seems like a great model for innovation because it breaks our brain, right? We are forced to find new approaches to
Right.
something that
Right.
we've not yet encountered. So even if we've been encountering these poems for decades, they're still baffling and puzzling,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And if you've never encountered it, it's even more baffling and puzzling. And so it seems like a why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I love it. Chris, we have someone on the phone. Who is calling, please?
We do. We have another call. Calling from Manhattan, we have Claire on the line.
Hello, Claire from Manhattan. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. Tell us about yourself. How'd you find ModPo? What's the story?
So I actually work at Coursera.
Whoa.
And
Whoa.
have been, and I studied English literature in college, and I have just been waiting all year to do ModPo Live. So happy to be
Oh,
here.
Claire. Oh, my God. What department at Coursera are you in?
I work in our full online degrees.
Oh, you're doing online degree stuff. Okay. Well, offline, I would love to be in touch with you offline because we could use your help in getting to the engineers. We've got some discussion forum problems. I'd love for you to be our inside person.
I can't promise my poll.
What's that?
Pardon?
What'd you say?
I can't promise that I have much sway, but I'll do my best.
Well, if you just tell your colleagues that ModPo is calling and that ModPo wants this or that, a door might be half opened. I'm kidding about this. So you're working from home in Manhattan for a Silicon Valley organization, and you studied English Lit. I guess I could ask you. No, I don't want to ask you how you got from English Lit to this job, but what was your experience studying literature, and why poetry? Why ModPo now?
I absolutely adored studying literature, took many classes on Dickinson, and have just been hungry ever since graduating to get back to it. And ModPo felt like a way to discover when you love Emily Dickinson, you just sort of read Emily Dickinson on repeat, and I was looking for a way to get into meeting new poets and learning new things. And so, just was absolutely delighted to be part of the live session.
That's great. Well, I'm about to invite you to really be part of the live session. Are you up for something, a little bit of a curveball? Are you up for that?
Sure, let's do it.
That's the right answer. Okay, let's do it. This is like a game show. Okay, so I am going to read. So do you remember the poem Danse Russe this week, William Carlos Williams? If not, we can get you to it. It's easy. It's on the main syllabus.
With you.
You're with me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Danse Russe. All right. I'm not going to read the poem. Everybody knows it. But what I'm going to do is read a comment by Cecilia Flynn. It's a fun, poking fun at her own situation kind of comment, but it's also pretty serious as well. It raises the question of rereading Danse Russe in the time of pandemic, in the time of lockdown. Cecilia is at home, locked down, wherever Cecilia is. I suspect somewhere in Europe or Australia. And so I'm going to read the comment, and then I'm going to invite you, Claire, and also then Amber Rose, Kinar, and Kate to respond in any way to it. Okay? Claire, you up for that?
Wonderful.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to read Cecilia. So this is a question of, this is Cecilia telling us what it's like to read Danse Russe in 2021. Excuse me for being self-referential, but there's a Danse Russe happening. My husband is in his room writing about democracy or politics or India. I am in the bedroom dancing naked in my head. We meet in the kitchen where he counts his nuts and takes a bite from his predictable apple. I laugh. We are confined. Later we walk, avoiding all others. Then we sleep. Wanting more lurks in the corner. That sentence is, wanting more lurks in the corner. Thank you, William Carlos Williams. I feel a little better about Danse Russe after reading that comment. Claire, I'm sorry you're on the spot. We haven't met, but do you want to take a stab at that, and we can come back to you at the end too? I'm going to ask Amber Rose, Kanar, and Kate also to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't read that comment, but it really aligns with my reading because I think the comment was very brave, just like the poem is very brave of admitting to the world that there are like intimate and vulnerable parts of yourself that, you know, like you wouldn't normally admit, but then when you do, there's this like sigh of relief of like, oh, other people dance naked in reality or in their head as well. So like, thank you for sharing that. Just like I felt that way reading the poem. And I just feel it so deeply of like the working from home, living with, you know, I lived with my family for a portion of the pandemic. And I think this intense time of living through such high emotions and having your work and your personal life and all of your life sort of condensed into one space sort of forces you to be vulnerable and intimate with your own thoughts, and especially the people you live with, in this new way of like, you know, shedding tears or sharing happiness or all of those things, sort of in this new space that, you know, at work you sort of put on this front versus the sort of intimacy of the own home. So yeah, that's a beautiful comment, and thank you for sharing it.
Claire, you're amazing. That was great. You're ready to be a TA. I think that was really great. Really.
We'll email.
Do you mind staying on the line for just a bit? Because at the very end, I want to come back to you. So we're going to turn to
absolutely.
That okay? Okay. So Amber Rose, Kanar, and Kate. Any thoughts on this at all? Really, what Cecilia has done playfully but deeply is to make us think about Williams as a person who works and lives in the same space, but the space isn't big enough, so he needs to find a space where he gets to call his creativity thing. And we've always been very skeptical of that because it's intrusive upon the other people who are trying to live in the space. But maybe Cecilia is getting something. I love her comment about the her husband's predictable apple. I mean, she's clearly a little, I don't know if she's tired of him, but she's tired of the same thing again. So Amber Rose, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I really liked this sort of poem response. I'm thinking about control and how much of Williams's poem seems to be about finding some release and reveling in a sense of control over the space, even if the space isn't doing enough or the space has to have do multiple things at once. Part of the like playful empowerment that he vocalizes is about a kind of control. And what I'm hearing in the response is a similar comfort in control, but that comfort is maybe like it is reaching its limit. Yeah. And that's where the wanting more is starting to lurk, right? The predictable apple is like a comfort and also sort of annoying. So I think that this poem kind of goes one step beyond, okay, after I felt control and after I felt joyful in this space, and then it starts to feel repetitive and monotonous, then it's almost like this person is trying to like push on the cracks, push on the seams of the walls to like get into a further space. So I'm thinking about that movement from control into like containment.
I like the way we're talking about this poem now. Amber Rose, thank you. That's great. Kanar and then Kate, a brief response each to the situation we're talking about.
So I thought that was a really beautiful just response. I think I heard I laugh, we are confined.
Yeah.
And wanting more likes in the corners, or in the corner maybe. That's really lovely. But yeah, I guess I was kind of thinking about, and this was when I was kind of revisiting the poem too, the sort of extravagance of the kind of closing lines, and kind of thinking about what extravagance is, which is this sort of like wandering outside. And for me, I think I'm seeing, maybe this speaks to kind of Amber Rose's point as well, a form of control that can exist in confinement that is this sort of extravagant performance that is sort of has a kind of like a freeing element of sorts. So yeah, I'm kind of curious about what fuels that, and you know, it seems like in the poem and in this response we have, part of what fuels it is just sort of relationships and the sort of subtle shifts and things that go on in kind of intimate relationships. So
yeah, great, thank you, Kanar. Kate, I have a feeling that you have a lot to say about this situation of sharing a house with people and trying to get some work done and all that.
I do. I really appreciated in Claire's poetic. Was it Claire?
Claire is on the phone. It was actually Cecilia.
Okay. In Cecilia's poetic response, how she inverted the gender positions, because when I read this poem, I respond to it as a parent, but my role as a parent is excluded from the poem, because you know the women are in the other room with the baby and or sleeping. And Cecilia's response, she had the man, the husband, in another room doing the dry intellectual labor. And I appreciated that she inverted the roles there.
Yeah. Yeah, he's there doing, I don't know, he's working on democracy or politics or India. I love the way she doesn't really know what he's working on. That's really cool. Claire, are you still there?
Yes. Hello.
Hi, Claire. So tell us, what's your impression of this whole thing? Not just this conversation we're having in response to a forum post, but just this whole thing, the live webcast thing, the MOOC that's actually not dead on arrival, but alive and happening, all that stuff.
It's why I started working here. I love it. I think it's wonderful.
Good.
The original reason why I had called in was I feel like the poet's work poem, reading it from an American perspective of like work having so much, you know, puritanical value. Like the fact that we have this global group of people to talk about this poem was so exciting to me.
Yeah.
And so that was what I was going to ask about. So I love it. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for including me.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for calling. And I'm so glad that, you know, I sort of ignored what you called about and got you into this activity, and it turned out to be what you called about. So this is the way things work sometimes when we're jiving. Thanks, Claire. One of these days, ModPo is going to go back on the road, and we always go to New York, and I hope you'll join us there for one of our in-person gatherings. So thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks. Have a great day. All right, we're going to take one more call, if there is another call, and it's 610-616-3208. And if you want to Skype from overseas or just prefer Skype anyway, ModPo Pen, 610-616-3208. What I'd like to do is ask Lily to tell us what's in the tweets, and then I'm going to choose between something from the tweets, between that or possibly a forum post that's very interesting to me, and we're going to go all the way around, not all the way around, but mostly around, and get real quick responses to this particular question that we're going to raise, and then maybe a call will come in, and then we'll do final words. Lily, what's happening in the Twitter sphere?
I've got a great tweet that I think a lot of us will have something to say from our friend Ray Maxwell, who seems to create new Twitter accounts every once in a while. Right now, he's Owl Patrol 66, which I like. Ray says, reading poetry can be therapy if done intentionally, but I am learning as I plow through Dante's Divine Comedy that the reader is a participant in the work of composing itself. Without the reader, there is no poetry. I read to a group last night and it was amazing.
Yay, Ray. Ray is always inventing new modes. Ray led I think it was by Zoom, a kind of out loud reading of Whitman's Song of Myself recently. Ray is constantly exploring, has a close relationship to literature written in Portuguese. Thank you, Ray, for being Ray. That is so fantastic. Hi, everybody. We're back after a delay. We're actually in a new YouTube stream, a different connection. Are we getting that link out to people? Do we have that link, Chris? Okay, we're going to send you a link, and we will, I guess, Zach will stitch these two together to create a recording of the whole. So here's the question that I wanted to throw out. And again, we'll take one more call, though there aren't that many people watching at this point. They'll come along, 610-616-3208. All right, so Ian Becht created this introductory, this welcome note, and said a couple things about himself. And in the middle of it, he writes, I always feel like I am doing it wrong. And what I'm going to do after I read a little bit of Ian's intro message is ask a bunch of you, Gabby, Max, Dave, Erica, Lainey, Lily, a bunch of you, to respond to this question as a kind of a general piece of advice to ModPo people. Again, he writes, I always feel like I'm doing it wrong. Okay, Ian Becht. Hello, everybody. He realizes he's not alone in the, quote, personally and professionally English engaged, English as in English literature engaged, but poetically challenged club. In other words, I do English, I do lit, but poetry is hard for me. I have a BA in literature several decades ago, have always been a voracious reader of fiction and nonfiction, and currently Ian's job is to teach academic writing, speaking, and linguistics at an English medium, meaning English language university in China. So Ian is in China teaching English. Yet I have often felt that I am an impatient reader. When I encounter a poem, I always feel like I am doing it wrong. It's a bit like my experience with meditation early on. These days, I don't beat myself up if I realize I'd been planning my next vacation after a 20-minute sit. I love week 1. I love week 2. Al, the TAs, and everybody serve as role models and guides. Happy to report I see an immediate parallel with my job. A large undercurrent of what I do is to get these kids to read and actively listen to texts in a critically and creatively engaged manner. I can already see that this course will be a masterclass in that. So what I'd like for you folks to do is to respond with wisdom, advice to Ian and everybody else who feels that when they encounter a poem that somehow they're always doing it wrong. All right, so we're going to start with Gabby, then Max, Dave, Erica, Lainey, and Lily. And then we'll do final words. Gabby, what would you say to Ian briefly? What wisdom do you have?
I would say you have to see what sticks. So I usually try to go, even if it's a sound, like what does this sound like? How does it feel in my mouth? How does it feel when I'm reading it? What does it do for me? If that doesn't give you anything, like what do I think of? What do I find in the lines? What surprises me? What doesn't? It's really a game of like, what's catching my attention and what isn't. And when something catches your attention, all you have to do really, and it's a harder question than it seems, is ask yourself, why did this catch my attention?
Love it. Thank you. Great advice. Max, can you focus on this question of what's wrong, doing it wrong in interpreting a poem or reading a poem or encountering a poem?
I think to think of poetry as having a sort of right approach or a wrong approach is a very common thing, especially for people who are new to the material, in part because I think when we approach any kind of text, especially a difficult text, in any sort of academic or academic adjacent setting, we start to approach it like philosophy or something, right? Like that there's something, there's some sort of information that we need to extract from this, and it's only one kind of information. And if we're getting different kinds of information, then we're doing it wrong, right? The way that we try to like understand a very dense philosophical text. But I think a way of be short-circuiting that impulse is to make a little bit more room for your taste or for your own sort of evaluative judgment, to remind yourself that it's an aesthetic object in many ways, and then to sort of allow yourself to like or dislike a poem, and to start from that point rather than rather than starting from a point of wondering whether or not you've gotten what was sort of stowed away within the poem. Just to ask yourself, like, is this good? Is this bad? And it's okay to dislike poems too. You know, it's okay to dislike what the teacher assigns. In fact, that's a very important part of the process of actually learning to interpret texts on your own and for yourself.
Really helpful, Max, especially at the beginning. You didn't use the word content, but you were kind of dancing around it. In a way, what you're saying is you think that a poem is supposed to convey some kind of import, some kind of luggage, some kind of content, some kind of matter. And then that can be a mistake because, you know, it's not a matter of getting what that poem is saying by way of content or not. And if you focus on how a poem does what it does, then subjectivity will come in. Really good advice. Dave, Erica, Lainey, Lily, quickly each a thought in response to Ian feeling like he always gets it wrong. Dave?
I really like what was said so far. This is definitely something that I feel all the time with literally everything. It's an imposter syndrome issue, and it happens, you know, like throughout all sorts of things. But poetry, definitely, because it seems so hard to penetrate at first, and especially when you hear somebody comment on something that never occurred to you, you think, oh wow, that's right, and I didn't do that, so that you feel like you've done it wrong. And I think that's just that's harmful, because we have to just accept that everybody brings something different to poetry. And one thing that I find really helpful is to read a poem and then put it down for a couple days or two and then go back to it. And then I find that when I go back to it again, my mind has, in that interim, somehow been making connections with the text and my life experience in ways that I wouldn't have done if I had just read it once. And at the end of the day, it just seems like it's all about making connections and bringing some of your personal life experience to bear on it too, and then sharing those with everybody else. So if we can just put aside the idea that there's a right and wrong way to approach these things and just go at it in terms of, let's find connections and share them and see what comes of it, that might be a helpful approach.
I like that. I think confidence is really associated. Either you gain confidence, yeah, I can do this, or you accept your lack of confidence. The latter is actually, I think, a more healthful approach. Disorientation is something we have to get used to. We're constantly disoriented by our world. We have to adapt to that disorientation and just plow forward. Have to get up in the morning, put your feet on the ground. To go forward. Okay, cool. Erica, Lainey, Lily, lightning round. Quick response to this question. Erica first.
I also often struggle in the ways that Dave was saying, being a fellow imposter syndrome person. A couple of strategies that I use all the time: read poems out loud, do what's called making a movie of the mind. It's a term that comes from Peter Elbow. So as you are reading a poem, I like to write down what I'm seeing in my head and then come back to that later. And it often helps me figure out how to at least find my way into a poem if I'm really struggling. So those are 2 tips.
It's also a great way to write.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Peter Elbow is referring to it. Yeah, that's really cool. Lainey?
I love what's been said so far. And I'll just add, echoing, you can't do it wrong. It's not an equation. There's not one right answer.
But don't you want an A for the class? I mean, you can't do it wrong, really.
No, you can't do it
Sorry,
wrong.
that was a Charles Bernstein thing, that kind of ridiculous irony.
And you are an ingredient in the poem, or you are the poem. So even if you come to a poem with no context whatsoever, you have no idea what the title means, you know nothing, your initial first encounter with the poem is so important. It only happens one time. And you can always add and gain context and come back to the poem, but your unique immediate experience and noticing what happens, that's important. Ian used the phrase, comparing to meditation. I don't beat myself up in meditation anymore. Well, good. Don't beat yourself up anymore when you come to a poem and you feel like you're banging your head, because as you're hearing, it happens to all of us. But the overlaying of judgment doesn't help. Instead, what I recommend is come back. It's a relationship. My relationship with a poem, it's lasted 30 years so far. I'm going to keep reading this Niederker poem, however many years I'm alive. So it's a relationship. If I have one conversation with a person and it doesn't go well, I don't think I'm wrong. I can never talk to that person again. It's you come back, and when you come back, it's a different day. You're in a different mood. You've read something else. You've talked to another person. So the poem on the page doesn't change, but we change in our ability. One day I might pick up a book and it's impenetrable. It's almost like it's written in a language I don't read. And the next day it appears clear words that I can understand. So time and patience, and just keep returning.
The reader's relationship to the poem is a moving target, is dynamic, and this is why in week 8 of the course, when we start to read the language poets, we realize that it was an idea whose time had definitely come because of the constant, say, Lynn Haginian in my life, the constant relationship that's changing between you and your life and Lynn in her life, and that can't possibly, by definition, stand still. Let's put a pin in the conversation about meditation and come back to it sometime, not now. But Ian is basically saying, I sit for 20 minutes in meditation and I realize I'm planning my next vacation. What John Ashbery, just to take a poet we admire by random, John Ashbery would say, go on that vacation in your head while you're meditating. Because that's a kind of meditation. That's fine, Okay, Lily, what do you think about this whole question? I know you think about this a lot.
I think it's just important to bring all your normal tools that you would bring to reading anything, to reading poetry. So it's not like cheating to Google a word if you don't know what it means or you're not sure what the poet intends by using it in this context, or if there's like a place name reference, like just look it up and don't be feeling like, I know we talked a lot about each person brings something specific to the poem, but don't feel like you're only limited to what you're bringing in your head. Like use your research tools, and that can include talking to someone else and asking if it makes sense to them. And yeah, just bring all of your regular reading comprehension stuff to reading a poem, and don't create more anxiety by thinking of it as something so different from another piece of writing.
Right. Be an active reader, in other words, do stuff. That's really cool. We are going to excerpt that last section, that last group of comments, because I think it would be great for ModPo Plus in our roster of introductory videos, where here we are talking about how to deal with the anxiety you feel about doing it wrong. All right, we have 5 minutes for final thoughts because 11 o'clock is coming up. So that means that we are talking about a word, a phrase, a sentence, some comment that you have as a final thought during week 2, or based on what we've been talking about today, or something that's coming up soon in ModPo. So we're going to start with Max, with Amber Rose on deck. Quick thought, final thought, Max.
There's a lot of great Niederker in ModPo Plus for this week. I recommend diving in there, even if you don't get to all of the main syllabus poems.
Whoa, radical. Go to ModPo Plus even if you haven't finished the main syllabus. Thank you. Allie is up next. And I'm sorry, Allie, I'm going to put Amber Rose on deck. So it's Allie and then Amber Rose.
I am going to start my office hours. So my office hour usually is at noon today on Wednesday. I'm going to start at 11:30 because I have a doctor appointment. So I am very much looking forward to continuing this conversation. I hope people pop in to say hi.
Thank you. Amber Rose up and Kanar is on deck.
I'm still on our work conversation, and it's reminding me of another conversation I was having yesterday with someone about trying to find balance in approaching the work. And I was told to keep 2 real or imaginary sticky notes. One that says, "This is just an exercise," and another one that says, "Create to your heart's content." And somewhere in that happy medium, maybe, work lies.
Very practical. I love that. We're being so helpful, I think. Thank you, Amber Rose. Kanar and Jason on deck. I think Kanar had to step out, so we're going to go to Jason, and Kate will be on deck. Oh, Kanar's there. There's Kanar. Hi, Kanar. Are you muted?
Hi. Sorry, I lost my Zoom window expander, and I couldn't find the
this happens.
function. So yes, sorry, I am here. So my office hours are on Thursday at 6 p.m. and I plan to hold them on Zoom this week. So
Yay.
I hope folks will, stop in. I'm excited to talk about some of the kinds of thresholds, disruptions, moments that are kind of glitchy as a reader in Niedecker or other poets. And I know some folks are interested in reading aloud, so I'd love to also just do some reading if people want to stop into Zoom this week. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Kanar. And you'll post the Zoom link in your office hour thread, and that's where people can get it. And I'm also going to recommend that if anybody's doing a Zoom office hour, and if you feel like, and if everybody agrees to this, turn on the recording and do a close reading of a poem together, collaborative close reading. And then you can send us the recording and we can do a little light editing and post that up. I think that would be great if you're interested in doing that. Okay, so Jason's up with Kate on deck. Jason, final thought? Jason, you're muted, I think.
No, I'm not. My office hour is tomorrow after, hold on. My office hour, I had a computer, church bells suddenly ringing in my ear, celebrating the hour, but to keep me on track in terms of time. But my office hours will be tomorrow at 8. So if you can't make NARS, come on over to mine and we'll be Zooming and doing poetry therapy and getting through. We'll be using poems to conduct therapy, and we'll be using therapy to conduct poetry. And I'm really interested in, I'm interested in talking about the Ray Armantrout poem Up This Week, which is really hard, I know. But I think we could have a really good, productive chat about it, or about anything else anyone wants to talk about. But I do think that the last 4 stanzas of the Armantrout poem are very apropos to the idea of feeling all the kind of feelings we have about poetry, because poetry brings us back to a point in time that we kind of disavow, where we are playing with language and entering into language as children.
Yes.
And so I can say a whole lot more about that, which I will in my office hours, but I'm just going to change one word in what Armentrout has. And to think of this as a formative portrait, not portrait of the artist, but portrait of the human in language. As a child, I was abandoned in a story made of words. Here's the small gasp of this clearing come upon again.
Nice. Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much. And I will say that we had our first really dissenter post about Armentrout's The Way. Usually everybody is very happy and harmonious in the first couple of weeks, and then some people start saying, I don't like it, I don't get it, what the heck is this? And we had a really nice one. I urge everybody to go in there and find that post and respond, not defensively, but just engage. Why do we like The Way? Okay, great. So Kate with Gabby on deck, and everybody be brief because we're at the top of the hour. Final thoughts.
I was going to say, I was also sorry we didn't get to Armentrout because I am so interested someday in having a conversation about how here functions in that poem as opposed to this, and different kinds of location and self-reflexivity in language in poetry. And my office hour is at 10 tomorrow, and if anyone wants, we can have that conversation there.
That would be cool. I'd like to be there. I mean, I am here, saith the Messiah in one context. So that here is very weird because it means that the Son of God in the story, the Son of God is here on the earth, and that's a different kind of here than the terrestrial here that we sometimes mean. I'm really interested in all of that. Thank you, Kate. Gabby, followed by Dave.
Yeah, my final word is that for those of you who care about the Dickinson-Whitman distinction, which is to say you either love it or you hate it, if you have feelings about it, the career of William Carlos Williams is a really interesting site for thinking about, one, why that distinction is useful, and two, why it's sort of arbitrary.
Oh, I like that.
He does both.
I like that. I'm obsessed with Williams and would love to talk about that. Dave, followed by Erica.
Quick comment just about, again, about work, and Amber Rose brought up how it implicates an innate desire to exert control over an environment, and it just makes me think about how we struggle against constraints. That can be one way of defining work, but many ways we need those constraints. We need them in order to exert some type of power. It makes me think of hockey fights, because when two players are on the ice and trying to throw punches, if they're just flat on their skates, they don't get any leverage, and they're not exerting power. They're not, putting in the work as much as they can be. So they're trying to get constraints by getting grounding. So in a lot of ways, these constraints that we push against are really necessary for us to do that. Also, I have office hours tonight, and that's all.
That's the first hockey fight analogy in 10 years, I think. So yeah, I'm glad we had that. Erica with Lily on deck, and then Lainey.
I want to go back to the question about the course on innovation and suggest that in the context of a business school, I imagine students are thinking about things like entrepreneurship. And I feel as though a lot of the kinds of experimental writing that we read in this course resonate along those lines. And, I also would just shout out the fact that the pedagogy of ModPo is a very, very different thing that I think that, post or in the midst of the pandemic is something I know I've appreciated and thought a lot about, how different an online learning experience this is from many other Zoom type things.
Thank you, Erica, for that praise of our model, which we did not invent so much as grow into over the years, which is really what it takes. You have to do this a long time. Lily and then Lainey, final thought.
I just want to make a plug for Canon challenges. Not just because I did the one for week 2, but
yours is
in
so
general,
excellent. I just watched it again. It is so good. Oh my gosh.
Al. If you, especially if this is maybe your second or third time going through the course, you might just be interested in thinking about, kind of leading from what Erica said, like our pedagogy at ModPo and what it means to create a modern and contemporary American poetry syllabus. We're always interested in thinking through that work as we've done it in the past and going forward. So I hope you might check out those videos and use them to jumpstart your own thinking or comments about the syllabus making in general.
Fantastic. Lainey Brown, final thought.
3 quick things. I'm also a huge fan of Ray's work and the way, and I wanted to recommend the poem talk on that poem.
With Rachel Blau Duplessis, Charles Bernstein, and Ron Silliman.
Right, which I just re-listened to. And also to say, as amazing as it is, it absolutely doesn't exhaust talking about the poem. So I would be glad to talk about it again, even though I talked about it in office hours. And thinking about work, the word play came up, and we didn't really get to that. So I just want to throw this out as a question mark. Work as play, play as work. If there's not play in the work, it's not the work. For me, and I think for a lot of these writers that we're looking at, the concept of play it's in there. Yeah. And then finally, my office hours are Mondays at noon, and I'm going to be Zooming. Ooh. So please join me.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Anand, for calling from Mumbai, and Claire from Manhattan, and also Ian for letting us use your introductory comment to talk about doing it wrong. And Cecilia Flynn, who's stuck at home with the predictable apple eater. We know you're having a good time anyway, but thanks for being part of ModPo. And Elisa Ferguson, who got us started talking about the work. And all of my colleagues, thank you. And Zelda and Chris and Zach, thank you guys. And we hope you enjoy the rest of week 2. And we'll be back a week from today for a week 3 webcast. So have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye.